George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
All the nice girls love a sailor. I don't know if she was nice, but the Rear Admiral certainly thought so. The head of Britain's Royal Navy is suspended for having an illicit extramarital affair with a subordinate. Well, she couldn't be a superior because he was actually the head of the British Royal Navy and right on the brink of World War III too. And the coalition of the willing, the fraudulent five, the flatulent five, or as I called them, the high five, are having their bluff called right at this minute by President Donald Trump, whom they falsely prayed in aid of their cockamamie idea of a 30-day ceasefire before negotiations begin. Israel continues to cut Palestinian children in half in Gaza, but they also seem to have lost the support of Donald Trump's White House. Talk about world upside down. It's the Peace Parley program. It is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, coming to you live from Moscow, capital city of the Russian Federation. It may be a television first, at least since the beginning of the war. No animals were harmed in the making of this broadcast, and absolutely no sanctions were broken either. So we have had quite a week, and actually we're having quite a weekend. Where do I start? Let me start with the hapless Rear Admiral. I think he's actually a full admiral, but I couldn't resist the pun. The head of the Royal Navy has had to step down, suspended from duty for not being able to keep his trousers up. I don't know if his finger on the nuclear trigger was any more reliable, but anyway, someone else will be standing in for the Rear Admiral from now on. Mind you, we've only got 8 warships at sea. Some of them are in the Far East on decorative, commemorative, and for display purposes only. We've only got 8 operational warships. When I was a Member of Parliament representing a warship building yard, Yarrows on the Clyde, our aim was a 21 surface fleet navy. Now we have 8. But that hasn't stopped the braggadocio of Keir Starmer. Who knows what fuels Keir Starmer's war talk? We do know that, unexpectedly interrupted by journalists with film cameras in a cabin on the train back from Kiev, well, they were scrambling to get rid of something. I have no idea if it was, as is now being widely speculated, cocaine. Certainly there were rather odd-looking Kleenexes, rather odd-looking little bags of white powder, rather odd-looking spoon incongruously placed on the table. I have no idea if any of them have ever partaken of the Colombian marching powder. But it's come to something that I wouldn't be in the least surprised, would you? That European political leaders might have been fueled by what the Zelensky tyranny has long stuffed up its hooter would not surprise anyone. They certainly act crazy enough for it. Let's take their performance at the weekend. Having tried everything they could to micturate on the parade in Moscow, the 80th anniversary of the triumph over Hitler fascism, and Hitler himself and his regime crushed in their lair by the Red Army of the Soviet Union, now represented as the successor state by Russia. Having tried everything they could, including refusing to allow elected presidents and prime ministers of EU countries, of NATO countries, having done everything they could to sabotage, threaten, browbeat those leaders into not coming to Moscow, they were reduced to refusing them the right to fly in their airspace and forcing them to take the long way round. One of them, President Vučić of Serbia, was forced to touch down in Baku. That is a long way round. They then sought to smear Putin's parade, they called it. Well, if it was Putin's parade, it was a jolly well attended one, and a rather impressive one, as any of you who've seen the footage already knows. The leader of China was here in Moscow. In fact, 27 heads of government and state were here, rather more than could be stuffed into a cabin on a train out of Kiev. It really rather showed the difference in scale, vivacity, and potential between the completely unreconstructed war party in Western Europe and the global South and Asia, which was represented in such profusion here on the parade in Moscow. Anyway, they tried to rain on Putin's parade. They even put me and Gayatri on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, stealing our own photograph without attribution, without credit, and definitely without payment. But my lawyer, Kevin Winters, at KRW Law, human rights firm in Belfast, are already on that matter. They did everything that they could to spoil the parade. And their last throw was to announce that they demanded, with consequences. Keir Starmer said, if Russia does not agree by Monday, he wagged his finger, to a 30-day unilaterally imposed ceasefire demanded by the loser in the war of the victor in the war, we will respond, said Keir Starmer. Respond with what? With the Gilbert and Sullivan Navy, with the emaciated and enfeebled British Armed Forces? He was not clear, certainly not himself. As we know, he couldn't punch his way out of a wet paper bag. But we will respond, he said, if Russia does not climb down. And crucially, he falsely prayed in aid the support of the United States President Donald Trump. It was a lie. And the bluff just burst like a paper bag full of candy, full of powder, which is now all over their faces. Because there will be no 30-day ceasefire. There will be no ceasefire before negotiations. And we waited up until 2 o'clock in the morning, this very morning, to watch live President Vladimir Putin burst their bubble, burst their paper bag. He went through the literally thousands of times that the Ukrainian regime has broken ceasefires, including this 3-day ceasefire over Victory Day weekend. Thousands of times. They flew drones, fired shells, did everything that they could to cause more bloodshed when a ceasefire was being unilaterally observed on the Russian side. And President Putin, very calm and collected, 73 years old, and there he was at 2 o'clock in the morning, speaking effortlessly to a press corps, in the front row of which were the BBC, Sky News, and I think CBC from the United States of America. Why do I mention that? Because these Western journalists are in the front row, 5 yards maximum from President Putin and recording, filming everything that he says. Why do I mention that? Because absolutely no Russian journalist would be allowed even to operate in Britain and the United States. That's what they mean when they call themselves the free world. That's what they mean when they talk about our values, for which they claim to be valiantly fighting. President Putin, on the rebound from that carriage in Kiev station, said there will be no 30-day ceasefire, but I'll meet you on Thursday in Istanbul. Not necessarily in person. I don't know if he's going for the first day of the negotiations, but he's going to meet with the Ukrainians in Istanbul on Thursday. The very thing which Keir Starmer said would be unacceptable to him, Macron and a couple of other jokers, and he said President Donald Trump. But Truth Social came to burst that bubble too. On Truth Social, President Trump declared in his usual capital letters, up our case, Zelensky better head for Istanbul on Thursday and begin negotiations. The United States and Russia are on exactly the same page, the same line on the same page. So now Zelensky has a choice. He can stick with the flatulent five, or he can recognize the reality which is now staring him so vividly in the face, that he needs to be on the plane to Istanbul on Thursday. And I'm very glad to hear it. As you very well know, this show did not want this war in Ukraine. We opposed it right from the beginning in 2014 when it started. Not 3 years ago, but 11 years ago. We opposed this war. We said that it should never have happened, need never have happened, and should be brought to a conclusion as speedily as possible. So we welcome the talks in Istanbul, and we hope that they resolve the fundamental issues which caused this war, which has killed 1 million people, which has seen blood and treasure in profusion wasted, thrown away, flushed down the drain. This is not the Europe that we seek, and it's not the Europe that we need to have. So we very much hope that the sanctions will be coming to an end, that the killing will be coming to an end, that the waste of blood and treasure will be coming to an end. But that will require the flatulent five to allow Zelensky to actually negotiate meaningfully and to reach an agreement which deals with the fundamental issues. With my guests this evening, we'll go into the detail of what some of them are, though they are already familiar to viewers of the mother of all talk shows. But the fact that negotiations will now have to take place in Istanbul this Thursday should be a cause for alleluias all over the world. Donald Trump's on a bit of a mazy run. He has apparently caused an enormous rift with Benjamin Netanyahu, something which, as you know, I predicted long ago here on the mother of all talk shows. I told you, Trump is the alpha male. Trump is the cock of the North. Trump does not share top billing with anyone. Least of all, I hear today, gone tomorrow, Prime Minister of a country of 8 million people who is awaiting a prison sentence as soon as he leaves office. Netanyahu just didn't show Donald Trump the right level of respect. I mean respect in the Tony Soprano mold. That's the kind of respect you've got to pay to the Don. He is, after all, the Don. And Netanyahu never, ever showed him any real respect. He acted as if he was the equal of the Don, if not the guy who was working the Don from behind and deceiving him into taking measures, steps and getting involved in all kinds of things that were against the interests of the Don and his country, the United States of America. First of all, the Don concluded essentially a peace treaty with the Houthis that were earlier described as terrorists. He called them brave men, whom he respected and honored, and that he now had a peace deal with them, that they were not going to attack any American ships, and he was not going to attack them. Then the Don flew the B-2 bombers all the way back from Diegogarcia to their bases in the United States of America, thus taking off the table any possibility of a United States war against Iran. The third round of talks just concluded a few hours ago in Oman. They were difficult but productive, said the Iranian leadership. So that's the Houthis solved. That's the Iran nuclear question on its way to be solved. But here's the unkindest cut of all for the little chiseling crook Netanyahu. Trump is directly negotiating with the Islamic resistance in Gaza. Directly. On how they can get a ceasefire, how they can get the remaining hostages being held in the Gaza Strip freed, and because he's on something of a Gulf waltz at the moment, Donald Trump, he even has let it be known that he might be prepared to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. Now, there's a lot of slips between cup and lip, but can you imagine how all this is going down in Netanyahu's cabinet room? His rivals are rubbing their hands with glee, for they sense that all of this marks doom for the premiership of Netanyahu, and the judges are dusting their wigs, ready to get their hands on him when the term of office of Netanyahu finally comes to an end. All the while, the Palestinian children continue to be murdered and mutilated. I watched a video today of a boy, well, half of a boy, and the ambulance man brought a blanket out of the ambulance, unwrapped it, and it was literally the other half of the boy. And tenderly and with great respect, he put the two halves together. It's very difficult to watch these things, to watch a genocide live on your telephone. But billions of people have now done so. And those politicians and those despicable wretches that call themselves journalists and broadcasters that have provided a chorus of support for this genocide are now beginning to shift uneasily in their seats because they know the gig is almost up. And when it's up, the history will begin to be written, and they're not going to come out any kind of roses when that happens. Tonight I have got the giant, and I mean giant, Chay Bowes here in the studio in Moscow, live. And I promise you, you're going to want to see and hear him. And in the second half of the show, I've got the one and only Jackson Hinkle, the most handsome, charismatic 24-year-old since I was 24 years old. It is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. I've got to tell you, most British people couldn't point out Ukraine or Syria on the map. This is a symptom of the Western decline. So I wouldn't, in other words, beat up the American public uniquely for that. This is a common characteristic. 4 million people watched MOATS. That's a truly astounding number of people. I mean, astounding. But it's still a tiny number compared to the population even of the United Kingdom, never mind the United States, never mind both of them together, and the rest of the English-speaking world, and never mind the rest of the non-English-speaking world. So we have to keep in perspective. We have more people who know more than we have ever had before. But we have a huge number of people who, I'm sorry to say, are mere sheep, who give life's blood if necessary, who give their sustenance financially, and who bray when asked, and dutifully get on board the truck taking them to the abattoir. But it seems to me, given the unique horror of 9/11, the impact of 9/11 on the American psyche, that the very organization that the US government says carried out the 9/11 mass murder of thousands of American citizens is the same Al-Qaeda that American weapons, money, diplomatic cover, and endless propaganda was used to put into power in Damascus. Now, as a contradiction, that is as sharp as it's possible to get as a contradiction. And we must do more to proselytize for that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You are watching the mother of all talk shows live from Moscow, a television first. I venture to suggest I cannot think of any other live broadcast that has gone out by a Western outlet throughout the course of the special military operation. No animals were harmed in the making of this broadcast, and no sanctions were broken. PC plod. Here is tonight's poll. Who won World War II? Which country won World War II? The United States or Russia? Duh! Well, you may say, why do I even have to ask that question? Because there are now 2 generations of people who have been miseducated into the facts of the Second World War, and we'll talk about them with Chay Bowes in just a minute. Which country won World War II? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you are watching on the YouTube stream, please make sure you've subscribed to the channel and give the program the thumbs up. As you know, we are heavily dependent on what we earn from YouTube, so we have to struggle with Mr. Algorithm. He's one of Tony Soprano's guys. Now, if you want to call the show, you can do so toll-free in the United States and Canada on +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Get dialing now. You won't get many other chances to make a call to a show like this coming live from Moscow. Now, I knew I'd like Chay Bowes because I always liked him on screen. I didn't know I'd love him. He's an absolute oracle. This man knows everything there is to know, and he delivers it in such a delightful Irish accent. Chay Bowes joins me now live in the studio in Moscow. Chay, welcome. You have been working non-stop on the square, talking about the parade, doing Moscow Mules, your regular show, and commenting everywhere with such, well, if I may say so, sagacity. For the viewers, sum up first before we get into what happens next. What was the meaning of the victory parade in Moscow this weekend?
Yeah, well, George, thanks for the kind comments. I mean, from the master, these are big plaudits. The meaning of this parade, I think you felt it, and you mentioned to me when we met after the parade that you might have shed a tear. Many people have said that to me. Russians, visitors, expats, people working here in the media. I think even the foreign media, by the lack of coverage and by how little they talked about the parade, you knew it was a huge success. So this was the 80th anniversary of what the Russians call, the Great Patriotic War, okay? And as I say in every commentary I give when I'm a correspondent on the square talking to an international audience, it's important that we explain to people how much of a living history this conflict is. Because there's not a person who marched on the square in front of us, there's not a person in the stands who doesn't have a family member or a familiar link or historical link in their village or town to somebody who was lost, a family that was devastated. The scale of the sacrifice of the Russian people as part of the Soviet Union, which was 15 republics, as you know, all which contributed, some of which were marching again on Red Square, the biggest parade since 2015. This was a momentous occasion. All of those peoples sacrificed an immense amount. It wasn't about communism, it wasn't about the Soviet Union. It was about the survival of a nation. And as the parade opens, it opens to an incredible piece of music, Sacred War. And it says, "Arise, great country, for a deadly fight." That's the opening chimes of this anthem. And it defined the Russian psyche, if you like, and that still lives on. And over the last 3 years that I've been living here full-time since the start of the military operation, I've watched the confidence of the Russian people evolve, if you like, particularly the younger people. And this parade seemed to be the pinnacle of a sea change in the attitude around, not being ashamed to be Russian, that they don't have to be somebody else, that they don't always have to look to the West for positive change. And that really, really struck me as tangible almost at the parade.
The international presence was also very impressive. Of course, the top honcho was Xi Jinping, the leader of the world's biggest country, but the president of Brazil was here, Vietnam was here, a lot of Africans were here, including the new hero, the new African Guevara, Captain Ibrahim Traore, that we have been talking about here on the show for quite some time now. It had a feeling about it that this was the Russia-China show with the global South gathering around them. It had a kind of changing of the guard feel about it to me. When you look in that train cabin I was talking about, with the leaders of the other side, they look a tired and tawdry group, don't they?
It looks a bit jaded, is the term. Even the lighting, it all looks a bit grim. Yeah. And I think it smacks of desperation. The confidence that you and I saw, and it's very hard to relay that. As a correspondent, I'm trying to tell people about the noise, the cobbles actually shaking. Yeah. And it's not about military might, it's about confidence. And as I say again, this renewed confidence in Russia that we're winning. We're not just winning the military conflict, which nobody in Russia wanted. They didn't create this war, but they know it has to be fought and it had to be won in whatever format that victory comes, which I think it's going to come. And I think most Russians would agree. It's about the idea of Russia, this Ruski Mir, this idea that they understand now here in Russia, I think, that the Europeans are serious about trying to destroy Russia, to try to dismember it. They're openly saying that they want to carve Russia up into smaller states, that they want Russia's energy, they want Russia's vast natural resources, this continental landmass. It's a huge, huge country, as you know. It's a multi-ethnic country, so many time zones, so many languages. So the idea that this massive Leviathan is held together under this pressure, 55 countries, 16,000 sanctions, more to come. It seems to have inoculated not just the economy, but the society, that people are looking at each other saying, we can do this. We can win. We can win on the battlefield, but we can win in economy and we can hold our society together. And I'd say that Vladimir Putin is probably more popular now. And I know people like Steve Rosenberg, who's constantly looking around in the bins of Moscow for something negative to say about this country, and his colleagues who were called to the Kremlin last night. I think they sense it too. They're finding it harder and harder to say negative things about Mr. Putin, who is an incredibly popular man. And that is to the great chagrin of people like Kaja Kallas, these very Russophobic people, whose only forward momentum seems to be carried by this anti-Russian energy. They only know what they don't want. They don't want Russia involved in international community. They don't want Russia in sport. They don't want the Russian language spoken. And that's defined by how easily they completely ignore human rights abuses in Ukraine, the abduction of people from the street. This is an open-air prison. It's a dictatorship, no elections. All of that is immediately discounted. And if there's a piece of litter on the ground in Red Square, this is on the front page, as you say. So I think there's an air of desperation. I think you saw that in this train carriage with these very unpopular people.
Every one of them unpopular.
Exceptionally unpopular.
Merz is not even in office yet, but only 23% of Germans.
Merz the magician, I'm calling him, because he strangely got re-elected. He wasn't elected, and Our Lady's elected. Yeah. Starmer, or the Starmer Führer, as I've coined the phrase, he's such a peculiarly...
Macron's on 23%.
Unpopular man. And it's incredible. I think he's the most unpopular new prime minister in many, many decades. And there's money for war. There's money for these long-winded aspirations, thousand-year Reich with Ukraine. There's money for everything, but there's no money for the pensioners, the poor pensioners, the people who fought the Nazis, the people who saved Britain in the air, in the skies, on the seas. If they are unlucky enough to survive in today's Britain, they are denied a fuel allowance. Can you imagine the granular insult of that? My own grandfather was a fireman in London, as many Irish were in the Second World War. And, he was a great fan of the United Kingdom. He's an Irishman. He served in the fire service. He would have been so angry to see what's happened to the UK now. And I think what Starmer does is also, he diminishes and demeans the idea of socialism. That, we should have an anti-war movement in the UK, led by Labour, greats like Tony Benn, greats like yourself. Where are these people? There's a vacuous hole now in the anti-war movement. Where is CND? Where is the calls for this insanity in Ukraine, which was manufactured, as you know, and protracted and propagated by really, really evil people in the State Department, in MI6, who are still desperate to cling on to the forward motion of escalation, as everybody else in the world realized that the war's already over. It's really who's going to say, look, it's over. The emperor has no clothes. When is that realization?
Who wants to be the last to die?
Who wants to be the last to die? And I think John Kerry said that about Vietnam very famously. He says, who's going to be the last man you ask to die for a mistake in Vietnam?
Exactly. Now, whatever was fueling it, their braggadocio was quickly burst by Trump today. They claimed they had Trump's backing for a 30-day ceasefire as a precondition to negotiation. Trump came out fighting. Go to Istanbul on Thursday, he ordered Zelensky. Zelensky's got no choice but to go. Am I right?
100%. For all of the Western or the European coalition of the
co-coalition of the willing.
You're right, yeah. For all of their bluster and PR spin, they're terrified. I know people who work on the fringes of the European Union. I was in Brussels not so long ago and talking to a lot of people there, and they are absolutely terrified of having to take on the massive millstone that is Mr. Zelensky, the narco-Führer. They're terrified of it because they know a premature entry of Ukraine into the EU is the end of the EU. And then by default, probably the end of NATO as well. They're all in a panic mode. So they completely have no other plan other than escalation, but they're secretly happy when the big Don steps in and says, look, get over to Istanbul, go and reignite the talks that were started in 2022, very soon after the start of this element of the conflict, because this conflict probably started in the aftermath of the Second World War, the cultivation of it.
Yeah.
With
I
funding
said 2014, but actually started in 1945.
With the CIA, the banderites, funding this aggressive Ukrainian nationalism in an attempt to destabilize the Ukrainian SSR, to pull it away from the Soviet Union, to exploit these ethno-nationalist links. It's the old playbook. So I think Trump stepping in, and it's very, as you say, it's refreshing, it's terrifying, but he is the cock of the walk. He does have the dollar, he does have the big army, and the Europeans know that among the entirety of NATO, from Washington to Istanbul, in 3 months, Russia makes more artillery shells, tanks, and heavy artillery equipment guns and military materiel than the whole of NATO does in an entire year. They know that it will take decades.
And no refrigerator or washing machine harmed.
Yeah, and we saw those refrigerators and washing machines 24 hours ago. They look very intimidating.
Exactly.
And so they understand that. The reality is that NATO has been shown to be a paper tiger as well. There's so much political capital, financial capital, and as you say, braggadocio built into the very existence of the EU now and its military wing, NATO, that they know they have to try to reverse out of Ukraine in some sort of plausible way. And that will end, as it did in Vietnam, when the Vietnamese dictator was very conveniently killed in a coup d'etat, which 30 years later we learned that the CIA had managed that coup. So Mr. Zelensky's in a very difficult position. He's caught between radical nationalists in Azov, in Pravi sector, who've warned him publicly that they'll kill him if he concedes to give up territory. You've got the Americans who want their money back. They're knocking on the door. You've got the Europeans telling him that they're going to give him everything he needs, but giving him absolutely nothing. They can't even put together 15 or 20,000 troops to go into Ukraine. If those troops do come into Ukraine, the Russians, and Sergei Lavrov has very clearly said, if they step foot onto Ukrainian soil, we'll see them as combatants and we will hit them very hard. And we know the Russians have the capability to do that. So they're in a very difficult place right now. As the Big Don says, they just don't have the cards, George.
So what are Russia's terms in Istanbul, do you think? What would it take to get the ink on the paper that should have been on in 22 that Boris Johnson wrecked? What would it take now? Because, of course, a lot of blood and treasure has been expended between then and now. Russia's demands are presumably more onerous, which is what we kept advising the Ukraine. When you do eventually settle, it's going to be for much tougher terms than it would have been at the beginning. What will it take, do you think? I know you don't speak for the government, but just to educate our viewers, what do you think Russia will be demanding in Istanbul?
Well, if you are on the street in Russia, or any town in Russia, I've been all over this huge country, and the discussions are the same. There's a sense now that things have changed somewhat. At the start of the conflict, at this phase of the conflict, there was a sense that this is a brotherly nation. We don't want to go too hard. We don't want to hit them too hard. They're our own people. There's nobody in Russia who doesn't have a Ukrainian aunt or uncle or a grandparent. The names are everywhere. So there's a very hard to decide where Russia ends and Ukraine begins. Ukraine was essentially part of the old Russian Empire as well. Malorussia.
Kiev was the capital of Russia.
Kiev was the capital. It was the Kievian Rus. So, this Ukrainian language that people are you speak in Ukraine, was essentially a dialect of Russian. And, it means the edge, Ukraine. That means on the edge, borderland. So there's been a lot of manufactured reality about it. Just like our nationhood in Ireland was diminished and undermined as in the British Empire because it had to be. This was a lot of manufacturing. Crimea gifted to the Ukrainian SSR by Nikita Khrushchev. And I often say to people, Crimea is Ukrainian. I say, well, was it Ukrainian in February 1954? They say, of course it was. I say, well, it actually wasn't. It was Russian. So there's an awful lot of ignorance, and that ignorance has to be cultivated, okay? What the Russians now see is they see that they've got the capacity militarily, societally, and politically, and to stay the course. Because as we speak, incrementally, Russia is grinding down the Ukrainian military. They have no men left to fight. They have no military-industrial complex. Every tank that the Ukrainians lose has to be replaced, not from an indigenous military-industrial complex, which Russia has a huge military-industrial complex. I tried to tell people how vast it is. Whole cities like Tula, like Ural-Vagonzavod, these massive, almost cities that produce tanks. Whole blast furnaces. The UK has one blast furnace, which is about to close. It's owned by the Chinese. Russia has at least 12 of them, and they run 24 hours a day. So this massive Soviet muscle memory has been re-energized into life, and it's only really kicking in now into its maximum productivity. And the West knows that. They can't win a land war against Russia. Russia has the most modern nuclear arsenal, the biggest nuclear arsenal, and it has the best and most deadly delivery system in Oreshnik, which we were told they were running out of missiles, they were using microwaves and dishwashers. Ursula told us this, and then suddenly the Oreshnik is seen, and we're told they've only got one or two of them. So what the Russians now have is a renewed confidence, and I think the sense in its sentence would be it's basically no deal is better than a bad deal now. There's people say we need to take Odessa, we need to take Kharkov, whereas people before were saying we just need to get this ended. But there is a sense now that, you know, Ukraine is on the ropes. And as you've said, it's like the gladiator standing above the Russian gladiator standing above the Ukrainian gladiator, who looks up and says, I demand a 30-day ceasefire. I mean, I posted this today on my Twitter, on my X profile. It's just this remarkable detachment from reality that the vanquished essentially is demanding a ceasefire of the Russians, who are essentially in control on the battlefield. As you saw, geostrategically, they're in control in Russia, in Moscow. Over 20 leaders here from very important countries, not small countries. This wasn't Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. This was China, the Indians represented, Indonesia. These are powerhouses which many people in the West like to think you know, don't have washing machines and microwaves, but they do. And this coalition, it's a coalition of confidence. And as you say, they're gathering under an umbrella, a Russian and Chinese umbrella, and that's given them renewed confidence. Like Mr. Traore coming to Moscow, he's under pressure, but he knows he has very big friends. So the Russians now know no deal is better than a bad deal. They're not going to be told to have a 30-day ceasefire, because the Ukrainians are desperate for a ceasefire, because they are getting wiped out, unfortunately, in a military sense, in places like Pokrovsk. They know they're finished there. But the Russians are very incrementally grinding forward. They'll negotiate while they advance. They won't stop. And I think what the Russians will want is the achievement of the goals of the special military operation, to deal with the fundamental issues that began this conflict. Denazification, which people laughed at in the West. Denazification, what is that? We all know what denazification is now, because we've seen the vastly disproportionate influence of Nazism and right-wing radical ideology on Ukrainian government. You know, they want the legally Russian territories under their control, at the very least. And they want to know that their children won't have to fight this war again. This is something I repeatedly hear from taxi drivers, from politicians, from soldiers. We don't want our kids to have to do this again. So we're going to finish the job this time. And I think that's the sense now. I think there's going to have to be some very difficult discussions among the Ukrainians as to who do they serve, either Ursula von der Leyen and Mrs. Callas, or their own people. And I think it's going to be Mrs. von der Leyen, Mrs. Callas, because you can see Ukraine has become essentially a dictatorship, an open-air prison. So it's very interesting what will happen. But as far as the Russian ideas, I think they're growing in confidence. I think you can feel that being here.
Definitely. That
the confidence is growing, that we've got this, we can do this. And they know that the worst the Americans will do is say, look, okay, I'm out, because the big Don is prone to that. He might say, I'm out of here, deal with it yourself. He doesn't like Zelensky. He likes Mr. Putin. He sees him as a peer, he sees him as a man of great political capability and strategic nous. And he's right. Zelensky is what Zelensky is. He's not in charge of anything. And I think he's going to become more and more isolated in his own community. We see more and more politicians speaking out somewhat, even in the media. People are getting more critical of him. A man not elected since 2019, remember. This is a dictatorship, a de facto dictatorship at the very best, you could call it. So I think we're in the end game. We're in the last quarter of the match, let's say. And the Russians are in no mood to sign a bad deal. They don't need to do it. They've got the capability to push this war forward. They don't want the war. Everyone wants the war over. As in every conflict, nobody sane wants the war. But they know no deal is better than a bad deal. And it's going to be very, very interesting what happens in Istanbul.
Chay Bowes, I told them you were the oracle. Now they know I wasn't exaggerating. The very best of luck to you. And thanks very much indeed for joining us. Chay Bowes must be surely followed by you on all social media platforms, and his Moscow Mule show is actually not just wise, it's extremely funny, and he is a funny, wise guy. Chay Bowes, thanks very much for joining us. We will take a break, and then I'll take your calls, assuming you've been able to get through. I don't know, because I can no longer see on my screen that you're there. But I'm very much hoping that you'll be joining me and staying with me for the rest of the show. Let me take a quick break. Paul in Ottawa, in Canada, and he wants to talk about Palestine. Who wouldn't? Go ahead, Paul.
I went to Israel in 1990 And I met a lot of people that went to Israel and they went to kibbutzes, and they were like, oh, you got to go to a kibbutz. And I went. And I have to say, they treated me very well. And they said, we're afraid of the Palestinians. They want to kill us all. And it was this propaganda that was just being perpetuated. And my belief at that time was, wow, they could show the Palestinians how to bring themselves up and even become better and better. The Palestinians should learn from the Israelis. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I understand that what you're saying is arrant Orientalist nonsense. Of course, I understand that you're paean of praise to the kibbutz, which is a settlement established on somebody else's land, stolen from them. The idea, how dare you, that these people who came from New York to occupy agricultural land had anything to teach the Palestinians who had been tilling that land for millennia is arrant Orientalist nonsense. And you say that they were afraid, Paul. They were right to be afraid. If I were to break into somebody's house and proceed to live in it, sending them out to live amongst the trash cans at the back of the house, I'd be afraid of them too. So there's nothing irrational about a thief feeling insecure, afraid of the people from whom he's stolen everything. That's absolutely rational.
Please forgive me for my ignorance back then. I was a young man. I believe in bringing humanity up. In my naivety, I thought, no, the Israelis are kind of on the right side. Now, it took me about 5 years to finally figure it out that, wow, these guys are insane. They are not just colonialists, they're really bad. I can't believe I did that. And I want everybody to know out there that you can change your mind. It doesn't matter. Please, open your eyes. And,
Very well said.
Please.
I forgive you, Paul. Please consider my earlier admonition to have been a premature ejaculation.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, your calls are coming up next. I hope that people have been able to get through and that you are receiving me loud and clear from Moscow. It's not my normal studio, of course, so I don't have all my bells and whistles available. And I'm hoping that someone will tell me in my ear when the first call comes up. But while I'm doing that, let me go to line one, where Elena is on the line. From where? I do not know. Elena, thanks for calling. What would you like to say?
Hello, George. I am from Barcelona, located in Barcelona now. First of all, I would like to thank you and to tell you, I would like to tell you that I'm a big fan of yours. And for the last 3 years, since the conflict started between Russia and Ukraine, and I realized that something wrong with mass media, and I'm not able to receive the right information, and I stumbled on MOATS on YouTube, and ever since I'm a very big fan of yours. And thank you very much for everything you have been doing for all of us. Well, my message today is a little bit nostalgic, particular. Thank you. Particular because these days, this is the big celebrations of the Great Patriotic War, as it is known in Russia. And as you can hear from your accent, probably I'm half Russian, half Ukrainian. Born in Kiev, not Kiev, but the last 28 years I've been living abroad. And my mother was born in Moscow, but lives in Kiev still at the age of 86, alone. And my sister lives in Moscow. So as you can see that it's very difficult for us to see each other those days. You know, when I was born, it was obviously Soviet Union, and we were receiving our passports at the age of 16. And when I came to get my passport, they asked me which nationality I would like to be, because obviously based on my parents' nationalities, I had a choice at that time. So obviously I was chosen to be Russian, as my family was, and we speak Russian until now. And then we got our so-called independence in 1991, and I got a new passport with a different nationality and different name. And my name has changed as well to a different name, which doesn't really reflect who I am. But that's what it is at the moment. And then while I was still at the university at that time, I remember also because we just got this independence, and the professors were coming to teach us and said, which language do we have to teach you? And everybody was saying, Russian, obviously, because nobody spoke Ukrainian at that time. And Kiev in particular was always very Russian-speaking city. So everybody was relieved. Russian was a common language at that time, obviously not anymore. And I don't know if many people have seen recently in the last 2 days, there was a old babushka arrested in Kiev, where she came to lay flowers from her miserable pension to the unknown soldier wearing a ribbon of St. George. And the police were questioning her and asking her to take it off and telling her that she is not allowed to wear these things. And she was so brave that she even said, you know, she was also wearing a little beret with a red star, you know, like your wife actually on the Red Square was wearing this uniform in those days. And she was so brave to say that my star is not visible to your camera, but your swastika is. This was so unbelievably strong, coming. Old woman who is not scared to say things like that. Obviously, she was detained. And there was another woman at the same place at the memorial listening to the victory song in Russian. So they also arrested her at that time. So that's very heartbroken for us to see that. And Kiev, as I said, was always a very Russian-speaking city, but after 34 years of forced Ukrainization, things have changed. And when I was there one time after 2014 coup, I did not realize that the parade of the Victory Day was cancelled, and these poor veterans were walking on the main streets, forgotten and abandoned by their state. Particularly, it's painful for me to be able to speak to my friends, which are still few in Kiev. Many left already. And unfortunately, we cannot speak to each other anymore. And that's because we have very different opinions about the situation. But this is why I was so happy to see you and your
Well, I'll tell you what, you said you... Thank you very much, Elena. You said that you were feeling nostalgic. You've made me feel very nostalgic indeed. A very moving historical and geographical tour of the horizon. And there you are in Barcelona. Your sister is in Moscow. Your mother is in Kiev. And you cannot actually properly stay in touch, properly visit each other. That is for sure. And these are all the consequences of the breakup of the Soviet Union, a breakup which I myself strongly opposed and was profoundly saddened by. But as we are where we are, it's important to put the cards on the table. Ukraine, as we knew it briefly, only existed as a feature of the USSR, as the Soviet Union. Land and property was taken from Poland, it was taken from Hungary, it was taken from Romania, and of course, much of it was the territory of Russia, Crimea, we talked about earlier. Nobody pretends that before Khrushchev gave Crimea to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic in 1954 after a few drinks, nobody pretended that Crimea was not Russian. If it was Russian in February of 1954, In what sense is it now not Russian? The people of Crimea voted in overwhelming numbers to rejoin the motherland when they got the opportunity. But the truth is, the Ukraine was an artificial state that was created by the Soviet Union. It did not exist in the previous era, and it may very well not exist at the end of this conflict. Part of it has already been taken by Russia. The new Romanian leadership, that I presume will be the overwhelming leader in the first round, Simeon, he wants Romania's land back from Ukraine. The Polish government, if these disintegrations begin to happen, are unlikely not to want their land back. And the Hungarians very definitely want Transcarpathia, Hungarian territory, Hungarian-speaking people. They want them back. So what an irony it would be if the singular achievement of the ultra-nationalists, many of them actual outright fascists in Ukraine and their Western backers, handlers, funders, armors, if their singular achievement was to actually wipe Ukraine off the map. Thanks very much, Elena. Wonderful call. Comments. John Herbert says, my father was in the Royal Air Force in World War II. He crewed a Lancaster bomber and he died in 2011. He demonstrated against the Iraq War. It is a fact that he would be ashamed of the UK now. May God rest his soul. John, thanks for that message. Paul Kelly says, go Chay, my friend from school, Cloister Enna. God bless you. He is a terrific character. Naveen says, Ukrainian Nazis participated in the VE Day victory parade in Whitehall with their Nazi insignia tattooed on their skin underneath their tunics. Mohammed is in Leeds on Russia and Starmer. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yes, hello, George. It's a pleasure being on your show. I want to talk about a few things. I want to talk about Pakistan and the conflict with Pakistan recently. Also, I want to give a bit of insight of my background. I am of Pakistani origin. I come from Pakistan. My great-grandfather was in World War I and II. We aligned ourselves with the British back then. We aligned ourselves with the British to fight Nazism. And we believe we did the right thing, basically, to fight Nazism. I believe Nazism and Zionism is very similar to each other. Zionism is a one-eyed ideology, so was Nazism. The Zionist movement alone, I believe, is like a global takeover where, the elites of the world get together, they plan, plot to contain the people, to divert the attention from people via media and all these things, and make all us humans fight with each other whilst they want to dominate the world, and literally rape it of its resources. And unfortunately, I believe, our people are not doing enough here. The people, whether you're Christian, Jews, or Muslims, we all need to get together and create a political movement here where we can all live peacefully within each other. Just quite recently, India attacked Pakistan, saying, there was a terrorist attack in Kashmir. What we said was, the Pakistanis said, listen, take your proof to the United Nations and show the proof to the world. Instead, India attacked us unilaterally, yes. And then also at the same time, we had Keir Starmer, who signaled to India, basically, that it was okay for them to attack us symbolically by giving them a trade deal. J.D. Vance, again, the American politics has been infiltrated by Zionism. British politics has been infiltrated by Zionism. Zionism is, we don't mind infiltration of societies and stuff, societies, countries, political systems, as long as it is for the advocation of good, good for humanity. It doesn't matter what colour, creed, religion, or anything we come from. Peace, love, and respect for all. We do, we should be able to live peacefully. Starmer.
Well, we're all in favour of. I'll need to stop you there because of the hour. Peace, love, and justice are indeed our worthy goals that we share, and they haven't been doing too well as ideals of late. That is for sure. I'm very glad that the firing has ceased, at least officially, along the line of control between India and Pakistan. The terrorist attack that you referred to was indeed a heinous and barbarous attack on civilian people. 24 or 25 people were cruelly murdered, most of them Hindus, but also Muslims and Christians. I said at the time, I say it again now, I believe that that terrorist attack was a false flag attack. I do not believe the story that the government of India gave. But that doesn't mean I want there to be a war between India and Pakistan. I definitely do not. As someone with a great deal of love for and experience in the Indian subcontinent, the very last thing in the world, on top of all the other issues of poverty and development, of actual terrorism, infiltrated into Pakistan, for example, from Afghanistan over many decades, fostered by the policies of the empire. The last thing I want to see is guns blazing and people dying between India and Pakistan. So I very much hope that that conflict will not restart. But I have to say, as I've said all along, as long as the people of Kashmir are not free to decide their own destiny, then the war between India and Pakistan is always waiting to happen. The only way of ensuring that there will be no future Indo-Pak wars is for the people of Jammu and Kashmir to be given what the United Nations unanimously in the 1950s decided that they must have, which is a free and fair plebiscite to decide where and with whom they want to be. Thank you, Mohammed. A big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the MOATS.tv website, as I just know you are going to do after the show this evening. Elias Haddad, Cliff Wells, Don Williamson, Robert Harker, Al Newt, all became our top donors this past week on the MOATS.tv portal, and I'm deeply grateful to all of you. It's really easy to donate. Just go to MOATS.tv and click on a little box. It doesn't matter if it's only £1, $1, or €1. We can't keep going twice a week unless you support us. Now, it's been an amazing week on the podcast. Podcast is still in the top 20 in South Africa. That audience is actually growing. We're in the top 40 in India, Bulgaria, Lithuania, and Ireland over the past 7 days. Now, you can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Now, more comments. Stephen Calder says, 80 years on and we need to fight again to defeat fascism from Britain to Ukraine in the US and in the settler colonial state. June Robertson says, I was hoping you would have Chay and Jackson on since they are both there too. Your hopes have been realized, June. And Palestinian82 says, Israel has lost Trump's support. Who gives them the bombs to cut children in half? It's another. Biden's really frustrated with Netanyahu again. I think it's rather more than that. We'll see what the great Jackson Hinkle thinks when he joins us very shortly. Christina Hines says Starmer is distracting from these serious problems in Britain by pretending to be important in the world. No truer word has been spoken tonight than that, Christina. You wouldn't think Britain was a complete dump with its society draining into the sewer. You wouldn't think that Britain had a multitude of economic, social, and other problems when you see Starmer strutting around the world trying to pretend he's a big shot, going around the world threatening people with America's army when America's army has left the room. Now, I want to give a poll update if there's one available. It is which country won World War II? You can vote on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And so far, on Telegram, 3% of you think the USA won World War II. On X, on my X, 18% of you think the USA won World War II. Who are these 18%? This is some kind of bot attack. The YouTube community poll, 9% think the USA won the war, and on the YouTube stream, only 6% say so. So 26,000 people have voted. 26,000. You've got still about half an hour left to go. I think I have Tony in Philadelphia online too. Let's see. Tony?
Yes, you do. What's up, man? How you doing, George?
All good, brother. Go ahead.
Oh man, how you? I was just calling because I'm sitting here in the United States and I see how Trump is moving. I see how he's acting. I see what he's doing, and I agree with a lot of it domestically. I just can't agree with a lot of it geopolitically. So, like, I look at it like in my school when I was coming up, they gave us all crossword puzzles and word searches, and they didn't educate us on anything. Like, I didn't learn anything about the world, about history, about economics, anything until I was already out of school and I was just working. So I just lost my job because of the political environment in America. I was working for PBS and NPR, but I voted for Trump, so they let me go. So I guess I can wrap this all up. I just gave that little backstory because I wrap this all up and say, like, where is the world going? Like, we got Russia and Ukraine over here, and it's obvious that Russia's winning the war. It's obvious that NATO started the war, and I'm in Philadelphia. I'm from Philly. I'm not like a Russian, a Ukrainian. I'm just a regular American. And I could see it point blank. I could see it. It's easy to see what's going on, but then we have the media out here trying to lie to us and spitting their propaganda. So it's real confusing out here. Like I go to Walmart and people are arguing about Ukraine and Russia, and they're like fighting in the parking lot because
Really?
people actually believe the lies.
Really?
Yes, I was actually involved in a whole scuffle probably not even a week ago. And I actually got kicked out of Walmart for 2 years. I got booted from my Walmart that's literally not even half a mile from my house for 2 years because I took Russia's side and was arguing with a lady who took Ukraine's side. And just because I was calling the Azov battalion Nazi sympathizers, the whole security team over there at Walmart, they kicked me out. They took my picture, told me I can't come back for 2 years. It was a whole little thing. But I just look at the tension in America.
I think they did you a good turn. Who needs Walmart? That is a fascinating call, Tony, and that's the atmosphere in Philadelphia. So, of course, they're not really expat, but Russian Americans, Ukrainian Americans, they're going to feel particularly strongly one way or the other about this conflict. But all of you as Americans, because frankly, there comes a point at which you've got to lose the first half, the epithet behind, don't you? You have to think like Americans. And it is not in America's interest to be involved in all these wars all over the world. America has more than enough troubles of its own, more than enough problems that need to be resolved back home in America. China has built thousands and thousands of miles of high-speed rail in the last 10 years. America has built zero, duck's egg, not 1 mile of high-speed railway. Get to fixing your infrastructure. Get your people into proper work, blue-collar union work. Get your industries back from where the capitalists took them in order to make more profits. Get America working again. Dare I say it, make America great again. That would be noble, Tony, and Philadelphia would be one of the big winners from that. Let me take a quick break, and an all-American hero, Jackson Hinkle, will be here when you come back. Stay tuned. Tony is in New York on the ceasefire. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to say that I've been listening to you since the 90s in WBAI. That was also the mother of all talk shows.
Wow.
And
it was.
Yeah, so I'm 54 now, and I was in my 20s as a political science major at Montclair State University. And, you know, I would listen to BAI, and I'm totally enthralled with your perspective, and now even more. So my question is this.
Thank you, brother.
What would Comandante Fidel Castro say about Gaza right now if he was alive?
Well, I'll tell you, I did have a conversation with a dear friend of ours, Alicia Castro, former Argentine ambassador to London, and prior to that, an Argentine MP. Prior to that, the Argentine ambassador to Venezuela. And we talked not about what Fidel would have done. I'll tell you what he did in southern Africa. He sent 55,000 Cuban volunteer soldiers to go and fight apartheid and smash it, defeat it, fundamentally kill it in Quito, Cuanavale, in the great battle in Angola. And 10,000 Cuban volunteers left their bones in the African soil, which is not irrelevant to the point I'm about to make. Alicia was making the point, she knew Hugo Chavez so very well, that Hugo Chavez would have had a real problem with the last 15 months because he was a man who felt that he had to do things, omniscience. He felt that he had to be present in such monumentous crises as that. And she thought that Comandante Hugo Chavez definitely would have gone to Gaza. He would have put himself in Gaza, in the middle of all this horror, because he would not mentally, psychologically have been able to bear the shame of not doing so, of merely talking from the sidelines, merely condemning. He would have preferred to go there and die there. That's the kind of man that Comandante Hugo Chavez was, and the kind of man that Comandante Fidel Castro was too.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
You're watching the mother of all talk shows live from Moscow, capital city of the Russian Federation. No animals have been harmed in the making of this show, and no sanctions have been broken either. But I hope a lot of people have been made to sit up and pay attention, because this has been the most remarkable weekend to be in Moscow. in Russia, more important than many. I would say maybe for the last 50, 60 years, this is an important weekend because, first of all, it established the centrality of Russia to the new world that is being born. The twins, Russia and China, were quite clearly on display in Red Square as the core of that new world that is being born. And the global south, I'm talking about Africa, I'm talking about Asia, I'm talking about Latin America, is now gathering round that new nucleus. It's going to be a very beautiful new world. I'm absolutely sure about that. It's also the weekend in which the ruinous conflict, proxy war launched by NATO on Russia, looks finally about to come to an end. And we spoke about that for the first half of the show. We will touch on it with my next guest, who is, as you already know, metaphorically speaking, my own son. There has never been a 24-year-old man as handsome, charismatic, and smart since I was 24. He is Jackson Hinkle, the host of Legitimate Targets, and who joins me live now for the first time with me in the studio. Jackson, welcome to the show. It's fabulous to see you in the flesh at last. I will talk to you about Russia, but I want to talk to you about America first. Because I said in my monologue that the Don Soprano, otherwise known as Donald Trump, he's on a bit of a roll at the moment. When you think of what's happened with the Yemen, with Iran, and with now the Palestinian resistance in Gaza, it's been a good week for him, don't you think?
I think so. I think you, myself, Haz al-Din, and a few others are the only people who are, at this point, looking like we might be vindicated for saying, don't write Trump off completely. His supporters have a very good, they have a very good opinion on geopolitical issues. And if he listens to his supporters, then it could be a very interesting presidency. And it's important to remind everyone, we're only a few months in.
Yeah.
Just the beginning.
3 months in, yeah.
I mean, if Kamala Harris was president and Ansar Allah in Yemen bombed the Ben Gurion airport and the Zionist entity, do you think that 3 days later, 4 days later, she'd be signing a peace deal with those same Houthis in Yemen? No, she never would.
And praising them as brave and honorable people.
Exactly. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. If Kamala Harris was president, she wouldn't be going toe-to-toe with Benjamin Netanyahu and saying, you're not going to drag me into a war with Iran. You're going to have to settle down and not do this second invasion. You're going to have to allow aid into Gaza. You'd just be sitting back and allowing everything to happen. And then also, Trump, it should be noted, played a large role, as I understand, in this Pakistan-India.
He says so anyway, yeah. He'd say so whether he did or not, but he definitely has claimed that he got the ceasefire, which would make his week even bigger.
Maybe the Chinese air defenses that were used in Pakistan had a bigger role than Trump, possibly, in securing an end to that conflict. But Russia as well. You look at what he tweeted out a few moments ago. He said, look, Zelensky needs to get his act together. President Putin has made an excellent offer, and if Ukraine doesn't make good on this offer, then I'm going to have some big questions about the leadership there. So it's a very interesting time.
As you rightly say, we face the very real danger of being proved right, that it was right to hope for Trump rather than Harris, that it was right to say, despite dreadful decisions, comments, statements, optics, he might actually come good on the big issues. So far, there's a real possibility that we may be proven right. But the thing about Trump is the absolutely, apparently uncontrollable need that he has to talk too much, to say contradictory things, like a bull in a china shop. That could still go wrong for everybody in the world, including us, who were asking people to be patient.
Yeah, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth later. And, you know, I'm not saying that Trump is the end-all be-all, neither are you. No. But we're simply saying that, as we've said from the very beginning, I think that Trump poses the unknown, you know, an alternative to what is known. And Kamala Harris is going to just be more of the same old, same old.
That's a fact.
I have big hopes for Trump. Obviously, he's got a lot of work to do before any of these things we just mentioned, besides Pakistan and India, are actually realized. And I've seen a lot of troubling things too. Just this week, Trump sent 125 long-range missiles to Ukraine from Germany, 100 Patriot missiles from Ukraine, or from Germany to Ukraine. And there's a lot of concerning things there as well. So it's good to not lose track of that.
There seems to be something happening, though. Friedman, of all people, in the New York Times, of all places, in an op-ed with the headline, Benjamin Netanyahu is not our ally. This Israeli government is not our ally, I think was the exact headline. Trump is negotiating this night directly with Hamas, the Islamic resistance in Gaza. Nobody saw that coming.
No, and I saw a report, I don't know if it's true, but right before I joined you here, a report that Eden Alexander, who's the American hostage being held in Gaza, he's an Israeli-American and was a soldier for Israel, they say that he's going to be freed as a part of these negotiations, which is something that was offered to the United States and to Israel before Israel recontinued the violence and stopped the ceasefire. And that was an effort to show goodwill. Hamas didn't have to do that. That was an extra step outside of what they had already agreed upon in the initial ceasefire. So now we're seeing that move, and that's the last American hostage. Once he's gone, Israel knows they have to worry because America has no reason to have any heightened level of care or concern for those hostages because every American will be safe.
Yeah, and then we can go back to his former announcement that this is not our war. I think he has to realize that Ukraine, Gaza, these were Biden's wars. He doesn't have to stick with them, and he'd be ill-advised to. Now, he's just about to take delivery of a flying palace, which has come to something when the United States is being gifted the new presidential jumbo jet. He's about to tour the Persian Gulf, the Arab countries there. He's going to try and shake down MBS for $1 trillion investment in the US economy, and he might well get it. But part of the price of normal relations in the Gulf is that Trump drops this American objection to the idea of a Palestinian state. And he's caused great consternation in Netanyahu's camp by appearing to say that he might well be ready to do that. Do you think he might?
We'll see. Israel clearly thinks that he might be willing to do that because today they said any unilateral decision to recognize Palestinian statehood will be met with a unilateral response from us. So those are fighting words as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I'm worried for Trump if he actually is serious about this, given what they're saying in Israel. There's been a lot of stuff going on this week, though. You had the comments from Mike Huckabee saying, we don't need Israel's approval to dictate our foreign policy. You had Trump reportedly say that, this genocide needs to come to an end. We need to get aid in. We need to have a ceasefire again. You have Trump saying that Saudi Arabia will not have to recognize the Zionist entity, will not have to restore relations with them. So there's a lot going on this week, and it's all headed in the right direction. I'm just hoping, and of course, we can't forget about Mike Waltz being fired over allegedly operating in effect as an agent of Netanyahu.
Effectively working for Netanyahu rather than the president who was supposed to be serving. Yeah. Tell people who Mike Waltz is and what his importance was.
Mike Waltz was the National Security Advisor for the United States, so it's a very high-ranking position. As I understand, under Tulsi Gabbard, who's the Director of National Intelligence and kind of oversees all the information comes to her every day and she gives it to Trump. NSA advisor is the man who's more of the working on the inside with all the organizations rather than overseeing it. Could be wrong about that, but that's what I've been told. So he's a very important role and obviously very close with Trump. And the fact that he was, in effect, serving the interests of a foreign state and trying to drag Trump into a war with Iran, I think just goes to show how much power Trump is willing to wield right now that he would get rid of him like that.
Yeah, although it's quite a good sinecure that he's sent him to at the United Nations. But you're right, he was sacked, and it was made clear why he was being sacked. The Don is the Don. He doesn't want to have his people working for rival families, even however close those rival families are. Now, you mentioned Iran. The B-2s, as I understand it, have left Diegogarcia. They are on their way back to the United States. This means that direct war between the United States and Iran is, for now at least, off the table. That's another very significant thing, isn't it?
Of course. I was in Yemen as well when
you were very bravely in Yemen.
They landed the B-2s at Diegogarcia when I was there. Yeah. And I remember texting my friends, I'm like, that's not a good sign at all. And then we had a few bombings really close to us. Then a few days after we left, I think one day after we left, the B-2s hit one of the storage facilities, presumably of some of the missile production in the mountains of Yemen. And it didn't do much damage. It kind of hindered the entrance to the facility, but it didn't actually do any damage to where they produced the missiles. And that was according to the Wall Street Journal. So I think those B-2 bombers, they're hard to detect, but as far as packing a punch and bombing through an entire mountain, they can't do much. It's a very difficult task to accomplish. So the feasibility of knocking out Iran's nuclear sites is next to impossible, I think. And it obviously poses the risk of great escalation. And the decision to bring them home is clearly a sign of, holding out the olive branch.
It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. The biggest enchilada, these are all big enchiladas, but the biggest one, the most likely to have led to World War III, to nuclear conflagration and the end of all humanity, was the Ukraine war. And you touched on it earlier, but let's not in any way minimize the significance of Trump ordering Zelensky to Istanbul on Thursday, because the fraudulent five, or the high five as I call them, given their habits, were telling him to do exactly the opposite when they were hanging out with them in the dives in Kiev. But Trump has blown all that away, if you'll forgive this continuing pun, has blown it all away by telling Zelensky, you be in Istanbul on Thursday. What do you think is likely to happen there?
I think that Zelensky is going to work closely with his, his fellow addicts like Starmer and Macron and who's the other guy today? Mertz. They're all doing something on the table. I don't know what it was they had.
Dudu or Dada, whoever he is, the erstwhile, here today, gone tomorrow, leader of Poland.
Yes. I think they're going to work overtime to try and obfuscate the situation in Trump and try to deceive him. Even Zelensky, 40 minutes after Trump said how happy he was that this is going to be happening, that this was offered by President Putin to meet in Istanbul, you had Zelensky tweet out that, yes, I'll be there. But he said something else. He told a big lie. He said, well, I'm very happy that this is happening. I will be there on Thursday or whatever in Istanbul. And I'm very happy that the ceasefire is going to be starting tomorrow. No one said anything about a ceasefire starting tomorrow.
It's a lie.
It's a lie. And he's saying that because Well, most people didn't actually listen to what President Putin said. President Putin said, first we're going to have negotiations, and then, based upon those negotiations, maybe we can have a
he said, I will not rule out a ceasefire if the negotiations are going right.
But now, you're going to have tomorrow come, and the next day come, and every day after that, where Russia's going to continue their operations, continue advancing on the battlefield, and you're going to have Zelensky the whole time saying, well, President Putin is not making good on his agreement of a ceasefire. I guarantee you that's what's going to happen. And unfortunately, I think that, who knows, maybe Trump is not paying attention enough either. And maybe he'll think that President Putin is not making good on his promises. I hope that doesn't happen. But that's kind of what it looks like if you read their tweets.
Yeah, I mean, Trump is capable of zigzags that would bewilder and dizzy most politicians. But he knows that this will have to be resolved at the negotiating table, or he's going to have to walk away from it, or he's going to have to really get involved in it. And if he really gets involved in it, he goes from being the peace president to the guy that presided over the end of the world. I don't think the Trump family dynasty is ready to pack up their business at this point. So I'm expecting the negotiations to begin. I don't actually think Putin himself will be there on Thursday. He might, but I would have, if I was Putin, I'd send Lavrov to get the early stages out of the way. I'd only show up when Zelensky was ready to sign the surrender. But it's up to them, of course. But I'm expecting high-level talks in Istanbul on Thursday. And that in itself is a vindication of the tough stand that Putin has taken and the amazing victory, 80th victory party we had this weekend. Isn't it extraordinary, the energy that you're beginning to feel about the new world?
It is. It is. I think the United States realizes that they're missing out on a lot right now.
Yeah.
I don't remember who it was. Someone said in the Russian government, they said that the U.S. is losing out on $300 billion a year in the Russian market. Trump's a businessman. I think he heard that and his ears perked up and he said, wow, what are we doing here? This is crazy. And it's true. I've been here for 8 or 9 months now, and there are many, many, many Western businesses who, by the way, are operating here with great losses, but under new names. You know, they've just changed the name of their corporation, and they're losing a lot of money in the process in doing that. But there's a lot of Western companies that are very excited to get back here and start doing deals again. Everything from small businesses that had buyers in Russia to law firms to large corporations, doesn't matter. Everyone wants to be back in this market because this market is succeeding while every major city in the United States looks like it looks like India, to be frank, at this point. It's not the people, I'm saying, but like the level of
the public
trashiness, the infrastructure, everything like that.
It is. This Eurasian, this nucleus, of course, Africa's critical, Latin America too, but this Eurasian landmass, this Russian-Chinese nucleus of what the new world is going to look like, it's pretty impressive, isn't it? I mean, you've been here 9 months, I've not even been here 9 days, but Moscow is a phenomenally impressive place.
No beach. There's no beach here, but...
Well, you're a Florida man, so you miss the beach more than me, but as a city, I mean, I've been in a lot of cities.
Yeah.
There are not many who look, which look like this.
No, there's nothing like this. And getting back to the point you said about it being the nucleus of this new world that's coming up, who are the most controversial, lightning bolts, but amazing leaders in the world today, other than President Putin and President Xi Jinping? You can look at Kim Jong-un, I think, is one of them. And I think Ibrahim Traore in Africa and in Burkina Faso is one of them. And who are they aligned with? Fully aligned with Russia. North Korea is sending their troops, not just to partake in the special military operation and, engineering positions on the back of the front, but they're on the front line doing stormtrooping operations and performing quite well. This new world order that is taking shape here with BRICS, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization out of Moscow, it's a lot closer to the Marxist-Leninist anti-imperialist perspective that is unshakable in North Korea and in Burkina Faso, and I think anyone in DC wants to admit, and it's very powerful.
Yeah, I'm sure that you're right. It is amazing to have you in the flesh. I still can't quite believe you're 24 because the level of sang-froid and wisdom that you display is truly amazing. I hope one day you're in the White House. You are the President of the United States.
First, we got to get you into 10 Downing Street.
You wouldn't have, maybe that train has left, but seriously, you have the poise and you have the things that are necessary to make America a better place. We'll talk about that later. I do hope that we see you in politics, but until then, we see you on legitimate targets. Tell us about that. How do we get that, and what does it deal with?
We're live on X 5 nights a week, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Moscow time, covering multipolarity, and it's pretty much only on X and Telegram. This week we had Elon Musk's father on. It was a really interesting conversation, guy, yeah. So everyone should check it out. And thank you so much for having me on.
Been wonderful. Jackson Hinkle, really an extraordinary young man. Now I'm going to take your calls right up until the end of the show. And Gayatri is going to review the social media news also. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They have nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
A big poll tonight, almost 30,000 already. Which country won World War II? Well, on Telegram, 97% say Russia. On X, 82% say Russia. On the YouTube community poll, 91% say Russia. And on the YouTube stream, 94% say Russia. So the propaganda and the miseducation system across the Western world hasn't really worked. Now, I'm going to stay on a little bit later because we started a little bit late. So let's go straight to Wigan, where Alan wants to talk about Moscow. Alan, what would you like to say? No, I'm going to Roxanne in Massachusetts first. Roxanne, welcome to the show.
Hello, George. Bless you. I just wanted to thank you. Thank you so much for being in Russia and celebrating their victory, and for bringing sanity to the world. And happy Mother's Day to Gayatri. And I just wanted to say I love you and respect you, and I just can't believe that this is such a good news day. I'm happy and optimistic that Trump will see the light and get us out of killing Palestinians. Also, I just wanted to say that I always make people watch your Senate hearings because I find that a great way to introduce them to you. And I just wanted to say thank you so much. Bless you, and I hope you have a wonderful stay in Russia.
God bless you, Roxanne. God bless you. I don't know if it is our Mother's Day in Britain, but for those of you for whom this is Mother's Day, a very, very happy Mother's Day to you. My good wife that you'll see later is, of course, the mother of 3. And the broken heart that we have all experienced over the last period is overwhelmingly about the sadness of the mothers that are losing their children, murdered and indeed maimed, mutilated, many of them now disabled, bereft of limbs, and so on. It is with an aching heart that we open our telephones and look at the latest news. So a very special Mother's Day wish for the mothers that are in places of conflict. Thanks for a beautiful call, Roxanne. Let's see if Alan in Wigan is there yet. Alan, are you there, my friend? What would you like to say?
I certainly am, George. Can you hear me?
Very clearly, all the way in Moscow, from Wigan. Okay. On you go, Alan.
George, thanks for taking my call. Keep up the good work, my friend. May I say that MOATS was in brilliant hands last Wednesday. Thought Nico House was an outstanding standing. Maybe not as dapper as you, but my God, it was a great show last Wednesday, George. George,
He's wonderful. He's wonderful. He's a close friend of ours.
Absolutely. George, saw your brief interview on RT. The victory parade must have been a sight to see. I mean, the pomp and ceremony and the emotion, George, was humbling to say the least. To have been there must have been so emotional. What an experience. The way the mainstream media smeared Russia regarding the 80th anniversary is disgusting. I have never been so ashamed of this country. Not the people, George, but our so-called political class. When you see Starmer, Macron, and the coalition of the willing, it makes me vomit. At the end of the day, George, I think there is a change coming, and shows like yours, like MOATS, are contributing to that change. All of us, George, collectively, have to keep banging on the door of truth and what is right. When I see Putin making his speeches to his people, I don't see an autocratic lunatic. I see a man who is fully in charge of his faculties, and all of his Russian reps, George, are top draw. And I get so emotional about it because of the lies that the mainstream media put out there. A change is coming regardless of our lying mainstream media. People are waking up, George, and if I may finish with a football analogy, the best footballer I ever saw was the Irish Maverick, was genius, was George Best. George, you, my friend, are the Georgie Best of geopolitics. Keep up the good work, because it's so
beautiful. How beautiful. You're making me cry. Thank you, Alan. George Best was the greatest footballer that I ever saw. And for you to say that is very touching for me. I don't think you are an outlier any more than I'm an outlier. I know the difference. I've been in 50 years of controversies, and I know when the significant majority are against me. I know it. I could show you my scars, literal and metaphoric. But I don't feel it on the Russia-Ukraine issue, not at all. I don't feel that I'm in the minority at all, and if I am in a minority, it's a very, very big minority. It is Starmer who's giving away our country's money that we desperately need for our own problems, our own people. He's giving it away, much of it stuck up the hooter of a guy who can't stop sniffing, much of it wasted in corruption and outright theft, and much of it blown away in weapons and ammunition in a losing war, throwing good money after bad, reinforcing failure. I believe that millions of British people are with you, Alan, and with me on that question. Maybe they don't like Russia, although an amazing number of people in Britain do like Russia and do like Putin. Take a look at Putin and then look at their own leaders and say, hey, it might not actually be so bad if we had somebody like him. Who take a look at Lavrov and then look at Lamy. Do I need to say more? Lavrov or Lamy? Who would you rather have running your foreign policy? There will not be many people anywhere, least of all in Tottenham, who would answer Lamy as the answer to that question. So you don't need to love Russia like I do and like you do. You don't need to like Putin and Lavrov. You just need to like Britain. You just need to like Britain and say, why don't we spend that money here at home? Why don't we make our own country great again instead of risking World War III for that little dwarfish thief called Volodymyr Zelensky? Thanks very much, Alan, for the great call. A big shout out to tonight's top donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Robert Brown, Christopher Webb, Bruce Marmey, Rebecca Christian, and Richard Bednar. Big thanks to all of you. And a request, final request for the night, to all of you to leave something in appreciation of this show and the work that goes into it on our website, moats.tv. Here's some comments. Hanan sends $5 Australian. Thank you very much, Hanan. I wish, George, if you talk about the election we had in Australia recently, I would love to know your opinion. I think you know my opinion, Hanan. It was two cheeks of the same arse fighting each other, and one cheek won, and it will make no difference. Whichever of these cheeks had prevailed, the role of Australia would have remained exactly the same. Tim Kangaroo, to go from talking about Australian elections to Tim Kangaroo, I first saw George Galloway when he verbally took down former Senator Norman Coleman in the US Senate. Norman Coleman was in the news this week proclaiming that, quote, Jews are the masters of the universe. I did see him say that. It was a very unwise thing to say. Ivo Broko Peric says Zionist relations with Nazi Germany is a neglected study of a topic that has been suppressed in the mainstream to such an extent it has become virtually taboo. And Jamila Asfu sends £10. Thanks, Jamila. Hello, Mr. Galloway. We are very proud of you. Tell them that Great Britain people love Russian people. Thank you, Jamila. You know, I got quite emotional talking earlier this week about our Arctic convoy men. 50% of our merchant sailors on the Arctic convoys perished in the icy waters of the North. Half of them. I know that well because former parliamentary colleague of mine, former Liverpool MP, Eddie Lloyden, may God rest his soul, was a very close friend of mine. He was on the Arctic convoys. He knew the men, many of whom perished on these Arctic convoys, sailing as merchant sailors, unarmed ships, taking goods, desperately needed supplies from the north of England, in his case from Liverpool, to Russia. Half of them drowned in the icy waters, sunk by U-boats and by the Luftwaffe. That's the kind of relationship that we in Britain used to have with Russia. I get emotional when I look at the video, and you can look at it too, of Yuri Gagarin touring the factories of Manchester, of Salford, and the adulation of the working people of the northwest of England when Gagarin came to Britain after becoming the first man in space. The first man in space. The first craft in space, in the Sputnik in 1957. The first man in space. The first woman in space. The first spacewalk. All of these things were achieved by Russia. And British people, ordinary British people, notwithstanding the wall-to-wall propaganda against Russia, respected it and admired it. And I don't think, I really mean this, I don't think the British people hate the Russians. It's our rulers and the hirelings that write for them and talk for them on the television and on the radio. It's them that hate the Russians, not the ordinary man and woman in our country. Now look, let me take a quick break while Gayatri joins me in the studio with the social media news roundup. Stay tuned. It's the mother of all talk shows.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Let me go to the Bronx whilst Gayatri finishes putting her lipstick on and hear from the United States. Gino in the Bronx, thanks for joining us. What would you like to say?
Oh, George, good to hear your voice again. It's the metamorphosis man, still here. Still
and you,
growing.
brother, go ahead.
Everything you said about the
Good
leaders
man.
there.
Go ahead.
Everything you said about the leaders there and the leaders here, the people in general still appreciate the sacrifice of the Russian people, the 27 million of them, and that are still being sacrificed fighting that offspring of Adolf. And so I give thanks to all of them and the arts that they send our way. And I just want to say also that, you have, years ago, I had, thanks for having Ray McGovern on. And if you notice in the shelf with the interview with you, Ray McGovern has the book. It's called JFK and the Unspeakable, which is about the assassination of JFK, which even Robert Kennedy Jr. said that's the best book on the topic. You'll see that displayed face forward on his shelf. And so thank you for getting Ray on. And the third part is for those out there, because I know you're in Russia. I believe you're in Russia still, are you?
Yes, I'm in Moscow. This is live from Moscow.
Okay, so I want to say something to those people out there who are listening. Years ago, with our greatest documented spiritual religious teacher, Edgar Cayce, who President Wilson went to on advice for the League of Nations, who Roosevelt went to advice for the New Deal, who Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla went to, predicted the Dead Sea Scrolls will be found, and what they'll say. He had this to say about Russia, real quick. After the revolution, he said, out of Russia, the religious development will come, the greater hope of the world that one or group that is closer in its relationships may fare the better, and the gradual changes and final settlement of conditions as to rule of the world. And Russia is there, the new birth, out of which will come a new understanding. And he said in China, the eventual conquering of self in China will be brought about, and in one day China will be the cradle of Christianity as applied in the lives of men. It's far off as men count time, but one day in the heart of men. So George, Tony Benn, I gave him a book on Edgar Cayce about 20 years ago on a talk of fascism and the medical community. He was there. He knew of Edgar, and he was very impressed, and he received the book. At that time, it was an earlier biography. The recent one I'm going to send to you, and you and Gayatri. And again, I thank you for being there. I'm glad you're still on the air and speaking truth.
No, Gino, we're still on the air as long as God gives us breath, and as long as good people like you in the Bronx are watching and calling the show. We've spanned the ocean, and we've spanned the political chasm in your call this evening. I'm so happy to have received it. Last call before I go to Gayatri is Terence in Corby in England. On you go, Tel.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, and everybody in Russia, the Russian people, the 27 million, the Poles, the Slavs. Bless you for standing next to UK, the good Brits in the Second World War. That's the first point, and there's nobody can take that away. Amen. No matter how much they hide it, you can't hide the truth, as St. Augustine said. You can burn it, bury it, it's always there. That's the first point. The second point is that I'd just like to make you aware, although you must be aware of it, with your feet in Belfast and whatever you've taken on Muscat. In the Republic, you've got rid of the Israeli ambassador. They are still chivying away, trying to chivvy away at the independence and the neutrality of the Irish Republic. It's never going to happen. The Irish people stand with good, honest people. They stand with truth and honesty. Yemen, Iran, they can see it. You can't get away from it. But they still chip away the Zionists. But they will lose in the Irish Republic because the first colony, telling you this, will be the last colony. What say you, Mr. Galloway?
Well, I'm so glad that you said it. As you know, you and I are of Irish descent. I have a special relationship with the Irish people. I'm very much hoping that in a jury of my peers in the courtroom in Dublin, I will defeat Elon Musk and X this year, and I feel confident about that. Our case is strong and sound, and the Irish people are great. The rejection of NATO is an article of faith, or ought to be, for the Irish people, and I believe if they are consulted, they will answer in the negative. They do not want to join NATO. Who'd want to join NATO at this point in time in particular? But the political class at the top of the Free State are so twisted and corrupted that they may very well try to end Irish neutrality without a referendum at all, merely by sleight of hand, merely by some parliamentary device. And that will give rise to great bitterness and opposition in Ireland. Ireland was Britain's first colony, but it was also the first colony to rise up in armed rebellion and to eventually comprehensively defeat a colonial rule in 3 of our 4 green fields. The 4th green field remains in bondage, but the other 3 green fields, if they are to freely live and breathe, will have to stay out of the colonialist club called NATO. So I very strongly agree with you, Terence, on that. And your paean of praise to the great Russian people and the great peoples of the former Soviet Union was very richly received here in this studio, where there are Russian people helping us with this show tonight. Very moving, very beautiful, and for which I thank you. But we're already past the normal close of the show, but we can't have a show without Gayatri's social media roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri? Has it been a big show?
Big show, big audience. Thank you all for tuning in. Well, we are live from Moscow, so of course people want to tune in. We are here, of course, to attend and honor the 80th anniversary of the Victory Day defeat over Hitler fascism. But as the papers want you to believe, you were here for Galloway's Day, away for Putin's parade.
It was very upsetting, that, wasn't it?
It's upsetting, it's insulting.
You looked great in the photograph, by the way. I didn't look that great, but you looked amazing in the photograph. They couldn't hide that. But they stole that photograph. That's our photograph.
We are expecting a sum from the papers.
A handsome sum. Our lawyers will get it.
Yes, exactly. No credits. Usually they do give credits, not this time. Very naughty of you all. So I just want to share some impressions, because I do feel very, very honored to be here on this very special historic occasion, especially amidst the hostility. As Marshal Zhukov, of course, said famously, we have liberated Europe from fascism, but they will never forgive us. And that's how it felt.
So prescient. It's exactly what's happened.
And what you said in that interview on the Red Square, where I was stood next to, it was from the Allied powers. This is actually a celebration of the Allied powers. So why were those other 2 missing?
Exactly. Imagine not wanting to take your share of the credit.
Yes.
Which was considerable. The United States made a considerable contribution to the victory in the Second World War.
They did.
And but for the British standing out alone when the French and the others folded like cheap deck chairs, there wouldn't have been a victory at all.
Exactly. And obviously, me coming from the Netherlands, I feel very, very much that difference. Where in the Netherlands, they can't say much about it. But now that I live in the UK, you can. You have something to be proud of. Whatever you say about Churchill, whatever you say about Stalin, Roosevelt, this is a historic achievement that should have been honored by all
together,
of us.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was sad, as you said in your interview. What impressed me most, because whilst you were on Red Square, I was looking over the Red Square. I was witnessing it all from inside. I was hovering between the studio setup, filming live. I was sitting between the breakfast room where the local Russians had booked in so they could have a view onto the Red Square. And the pride and the remembrance of the Russian people is something unheard of to me, unknown, because I am Indonesian, and the closest I get to it is, of course, our Independence Day from Dutch colonialism, but even that it doesn't come close. It takes form in the Immortal Regiment. This is what really stood out for me.
This is the pictures of the
parade of pictures of all the relatives that have fought during the war and have were killed. I mean, 27 million of them. So surely anyone in Russia, throughout Russia, all the way to Vladivostok, they have lost people.
27 million means every family, right?
Every family has one.
Putin's family, Lavrov's family, everybody's family.
Everyone, and as you can see from the pictures, little children are engaged in this parade of the Immortal Regiment, and that keeps the memory alive, and so the Russian people will never forget.
And they don't want to. You and I were walking very late last night, in the early hours of the morning, and there was a little boy and his dad, and the little boy was waving his 2 paper victory flags with incredible gusto and energy for a kid at 1 o'clock or so in the morning.
Exactly.
They don't want to forget.
They don't want to forget. And so it's not just the people parading. As you can see in the pictures that came before, the police cars, they display pictures of their lost relatives. Shops, they display pictures of their lost relatives. On our first night when we arrived, there was a garbage truck going past to clean the streets. And they displayed their pictures of their lost relatives on their window. So this is so powerful. And this is something that if these leaders that were in that train carriage think that they can crush the Russian nation just by some sanctions, they are very, very wrong. We walk around Moscow. We've been around Russia, and we see Russia today is now, it's white. It's always been a white Christian country, but it's a capitalist country. What's there to hate? But Moscow, seeing Moscow, how it's so clean, so well maintained, and you know, in London, in all the big cities, you've got this nice little hub. In London, we would say Mayfair, and I would say, oh, Moscow is like Mayfair. The buildings are beautiful, it's luxurious, and
I don't know who the mayor is, but he's done a hell of a job.
Very good
if
job.
Only the mayor of London could keep London looking
so beautiful.
1/10 as well as Moscow.
And most importantly, in Moscow and other places we've been in Russia, there's no sense of menace. You hear that? Can you imagine a big city in Europe, in the United States, and
the biggest city in Europe?
Yes.
The biggest.
No, I'm talking about other cities.
Yeah.
Of course, Moscow is the biggest city in Europe, but there's no sense of menace, which you would have in other capitals, where you always have to watch your back, look out, or when you walk a certain street. And that is something to achieve
really
in a city, in a capital city of 20 million, is it? It's
21 million.
Yes. So, yeah, very, very impressive, and again, very honored to be here. So Deborah Marx says, the next wave of fascism will not come with cattle cars and camps, but with a friendly face. This is a quote by Bertram Gross in the 1950s. We have been warned, but doubt that we are paying sufficient attention. And so we were asking in the poll which country won the war in World War II, which country won World War II rather. MH60 says, my dad was a veteran, ex-Royal Marine, and he told me that the Soviets won the war for all of us. And that's when I was a little child. Ali Haider Khan says, America's involvement was crucial in enabling Russia to win World War II. Whereas Bitcoinist says, Britain, by surviving alone for so long and so defiantly. Had we have gone down, America would have stayed out and Russia would have been overrun.
I mean, that's it. So the answer is all of us.
All of us.
We all won World War II.
So why were not
And if we'd
them?
lost it, many whole categories would now be dead, extinct. Jews would be extinct. Not a Jew would be left alive if we had lost the Second World War. Not a disabled person, not a gay person, not a Jehovah Witness, not a socialist or a communist or a trade unionist, not a Muslim would have been left alive. Whole categories of people would have been annihilated. So we all won the Second World War. Who made the biggest contribution? Of that there is no doubt. Only a lunatic or a liar would doubt who made the major contribution in the victory over fascism in World War II. Sorry, Gayatri, I interrupted you. I'm sure I'll pay for it later. Have you got any final points to make?
Yes, let me just remind you to close the show that on this day, 11th of May, Frank McDonald tweets, Tory Prime Minister Spencer Perceval was shot dead in the House of Commons by John Billingham, a merchant who felt he'd been unjustly imprisoned in Russia and was entitled to compensation from the government. Perceval is the only British Prime Minister.
And what was the year?
Murdered. 1812.
In 1812, the year of the overture, there's a picture of it. My goodness, the editor's sharp. in 1812, in a dispute over Russia, the only British Prime Minister ever murdered was killed by Spencer Perceval on the stairs. We've been there. On the stairs, leading up from the central lobby upstairs to the committee room corridor. There's a place which I showed Gayatri where the one and only British Prime Minister to be shot dead in Parliament was shot by Spencer Perceval, and it was all about Russia. You see, we have an intimate and unfortunately tortuous relationship with Russia in Britain. Our rulers have an ancient hatred. Our people have a profound love. The Robert Burns culture in Russia was stronger than it was in Scotland, the country of Robert Burns' birth and death. He, as a universal poet, who stood for brotherhood of man, who stood for justice and truth, was more read and more widely respected here in Russia than he ever was in Scotland, still less in the United Kingdom as a whole. These ideals of freedom, of sovereignty, of faith, of family, of patriotism, that are so resurgent here in Russia, would be better resurgent in the rest of the world too. The reason Russia is great is because these cornerstones of faith, family, sovereignty, and independence, these cornerstones are what makes the Russian future so secure. Well, look, I've kept you all long enough. I've certainly kept my friends who put this show on the road long enough. And Gayatri fancies some chips, even though it is very, very late at night here. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, come back on Wednesday at 7 p.m. UK time for the midweek mother of all talk shows. We are sorry to leave Moscow, but we'll be back, God willing, before very long. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Good night.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.